Hello everybody! Now you asked on the best ways of cutting your 3.5 inch squares. So I'm going to show you the quickest and the easiest ways of getting perfect 3.5 inch squares. So if you have a 1/2 metre of material or a strip, a long quarter, this is what I would do. Now I'm cutting it off of the bolt. So what I am looking at, I've got my long ruler because it's going to extend across the whole width of the fabric. If you haven't got as long a ruler as this, you can always fold your fabric so you're cutting through 2 layers. Now this one, I am going to cut through 2 layers because the fabric is folded. But I have got another piece of fabric because I thought I'm going to cut 2 layers at the same time, or in actual fact 4 layers. So I will lay my other piece on top, roughly align the edges, okay, and make sure I align the fold, because the fold is most important so that you don't get your bananas. So I could either, the normal way is we would trim this edge, this raw edge first. So I would have the fabric, because I'm right-handed, I'd have that raw edge on the right and line it up, and then I would turn the fabric back around again. I'll show you that in a moment. But for ease, what I tend to do, I look for my 3.5 inch line along here and I place it down, and I make sure that 3.5 line has a little bit of excess to the left, only minimal because I don't want to waste fabric, and all the way down. So I can see that there's probably 1/4 inch. I could go over a little bit further. So as minimal as you can to make sure when you cut second time, we're going to trim that bit off. So the most important thing to stop your bananas is the horizontal marks on your ruler need to be on that fold line. So as long as that's totally on the fold, then I put my hand onto the ruler, probably 1/4 to halfway up, so that I'm holding it firmly. And then I'm going to press down on the mat, not directly onto the fabric, on the mat, and roll onto the fabric. When my blade is near my hand, carefully I keep my blade in the fabric, move my hand to the further end and go all the way down. Now let's just move those out of the way. Ugh, that is obviously having a proper sharp blade, which I have, but I just didn't. I didn't press firmly enough. Let's just see, that's it. So let's move those out of the way. Now I have my straight cut edge, which you don't want to misalign that. I'm going to swivel that around. You'll notice I don't bother to line up this with a marking on my mat. All I ever do is use the lines on my ruler because they will remain accurate forever, whereas the lines on your mat may extend, they may get thicker, they may curve over time. So now I'm looking at the 3.5 inch mark on the ruler and I'm lining it up with that cut edge the whole way down. And you'll see that line is perfectly 3.5 inches on that line. And there is my excess fabric here. So I do the same thing again, open the blade, cut to a point, move my hand up and go all the way to the end. Push that away while the blade is open. That way, like previously, I don't have to realign it. And then I have my strips of 3.5 inch wide fabric. So at this point, I am going to place, now I am going, oh no, I've got 2 together there, that's lovely. So I'm now going to pop that down, and I'm cutting through 4 layers, but so that, and it will be quite easy with a nice sharp blade to be able to cut through 4 layers. But so that I can show you a couple of ways of doing this, I'm going to do one at a time. So my normal way of cutting this is I would take a smaller ruler here, and you can either trim like that, which is harder. You've got the bulk of your ruler extending past the fabric and the table. So as a right-handed person, I would have my fabric to the left, the majority of it, and then I'm going to make sure that my selvage is on both sides. Yes, that cream line there. So I'm going to move my ruler across. Now I'm not putting the edge of the ruler on the edge of the fabric. I'm going to use one of the other lines. I know this strip is the right width, so it doesn't matter what it reads on my ruler, but I'm just going to use that horizontal line along the edge of the fabric. And what you will notice is that the bottom of the fabric is exactly on the edge of your fabric at, well, at this point it says 4 because I'm half an inch away. So with that in place, I'm going to trim that off. Then I would turn this around, okay, like so. Now, I'm going to waste a little bit here. So if I'm going to put this one back on here. So let's just pretend I'm putting that one on top. Pretend I'm going through another layer. A second way of trimming off the selvage. There is the selvage. Let me turn it over so you can see it even more. There is the selvage. Right. There's always noises when I decide to do a live. So I want to trim that selvage off. Now what you can do, instead of trying to put your ruler right over here, which can tilt and move, I'm thinking 3.5. So I'm looking at that selvage line there. And if I put my ruler, so the 3.5 is just a little way in from the selvage, and again, line up my horizontal with the edge. Now I have got the top there, but you needn't. I can use any horizontal line, and you'll see the horizontal line lines up with the other edge of the fabric, and I'm looking for this 3.5 inch line to have the excess to the side. This way I haven't got to move my fabrics around. So I would cut across there. I can then easily swivel that around, so I can now align 3.5 inches with the last cut edge. Also, if you want to be absolutely certain, line the horizontal along the top and the bottom, and this way you are going to have your perfect, oh, must be a little nodule there, the perfect 3.5 inch squares ready for your stitching. Okay, so let me just, what I'll do now is show you another way as well. So I have my strip. I'm just going to get another tool, which I absolutely love, which mine is a June Taylor shape cut, but you can also get Creative Grid Stripology rulers. So there is your chance to earn your 10%. So a Stripology ruler is just like this. Okay, what we have is lots of little eyelets. Let's pop it down on here for the rotary, and slits. You can see the slits in here, and your rotary blade slides between those strips in the slits and gives you perfect squares. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put this one at the very end. I can put it just onto the edge. Just move that up. Just onto the edge of the fabric, because that's going to trim off the edge of the fabric as well. So I am going to line up, I'm going to push this along because I want the very bottom line to line up, there we go, with the bottom of my fabric. So that solid black line along here is lined up with the bottom. I can just trim off a sliver here. So I'm going to put my rotary cutter blade into that teardrop and run the rotary cutter there. Now there's the tiniest little bit that's trimmed off, so I know this is going to be a perfect square. I want 3.5 inches. So here is my 3 and my 4. So with my fingers away from the lane that I'm popping my blade into, but I'm just holding it down and rolling that through. 3.5, another 3.5 is 7, moving my hand. 7 and 3.5 is 10.5. 10.5 and 3.5 is 14. And the last one is 14 and 3.5 is 17.5. So push that away. Now my last one, because I'd already trimmed some, is not true. But there is 4 3.5, 4 3.5, 4 3.5, 4 3.5, and that one underneath wasn't, because I trimmed some away. But here is the minimal amount that was trimmed off to give that very first square a perfection. Okay, so I've got all of those made very, very quickly. Secondly, you may have scraps of fabric because that's what you are doing it with. So here I have a scrap. It could be a worse scrap than that. It could be all angular. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to use a square ruler to cut myself a 3.5-inch square. Well, I think I'll probably get far more, but I'll cut one out of this corner and go from there. So what we're looking at is that 3.5, it's a dashed line on this ruler, 3.5-inch square. So always when I'm using a square ruler or a rectangular ruler, I will have my 1 inch by 1 inch square. So where the one starts in the top right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then for the vertical, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This corner is always top right. So I'm going to place my ruler, let's move it across there, place the ruler down, looking at my 3.5-inch square here. So I can see I'm dragging that down. I can see there's a little bit of excess this side and a little bit that side as well. So having seen that I can cut myself a 3.5-inch square, I am going to hold that down and I'm going to cut upwards and across the top. Okay, I'm going to pull that away. Then I am going to swivel this around 180 degrees, so like that, so that now my cut edges are here and here. So on those edges, I'm going to line up the 3.5-inch square exactly. So the dashed line is on there. You can see where the excess fabric over and above 3.5 inches square is. So I'm going to trim up there, trim across there. Let's see if we can flick those away. And there again, tiny little thread there, I have the perfect 3.5-inch square. And just to prove it for you, let's take one of these and pop that on, pop that on there. And there we have another perfect 3.5-inch square. So, hope this helps you in the cutting of your 3.5-inch squares for the mystery quilt. And I'll be back shortly with any other help that you may need as you're going. So, happy sewing!